As the courtroom filled again after the break, it was clear that both sides were gearing up for the final stretch. Musk had made his case. He'd presented expert testimony, shown evidence, and calmly torn down the prosecution's arguments one by one. Now it was time for the closing statements. Everyone knew this was the moment that would seal the case, and the air in the room was thick with anticipation. Klein, the prosecutor, stood up first. He adjusted his glasses, looked at the judge, and then turned to face the jury. His expression was stern, and there was a clear sense of frustration in his eyes. The day had not gone the way he had expected, but he wasn't ready to back down just yet. "Members of the jury," Klein began, his voice booming in the silent room, "we are here because an accident happened. An accident that shouldn't have. There is no question about that. This company, Hypertronic, failed in its duty. They cut corners. They ignored clear warning signs, and as a result, people were hurt. We cannot let that go unpunished." His words were sharp, designed to stir emotion, to make the jury feel the weight of the incident. He pointed at Musk, who was sitting across the room, calm and still. "This man," Klein continued, "claims to be a visionary, but his company, his leadership, led to disaster. No matter how many emails, no matter how many expert witnesses he brings in, the truth is simple. A failure occurred, and it could have been avoided." Musk sat quietly, watching Klein with an unreadable expression. He wasn't reacting to the prosecutor's words, but there was no doubt that he was processing every detail. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up, facing the jury directly. The room seemed to hold its breath. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. "Members of the jury," Musk began, his voice steady but powerful, "I know what you've been told. I know the story you've heard. But that's not the whole truth. Yes, an accident happened. Yes, it was serious. But it wasn't because of negligence. It wasn't because we didn't care. It happened because sometimes, in the pursuit of innovation, things go wrong. We did everything we could to prevent it. We acted swiftly when we saw the risks. And we learned from it." He paused, looking each juror in the eye. "What you have to ask yourselves is not whether the accident should have happened. It's whether we did everything we could to prevent it. And the answer is yes, we did. We didn't ignore the risks. We didn't cut corners. We didn't put profit over safety. We did everything by the book." Musk took a deep breath before continuing, his voice softer now, but still firm. "I'm not perfect. No one is. But the truth is this. The system we built was designed to prevent exactly what happened. And when things went wrong, we fixed them. We didn't wait. We didn't cover up mistakes. We acted." The courtroom was quiet as Musk finished his statement. There were no dramatic gestures, no over-the-top speeches, just a man who believed in what he was saying and was willing to stand by it. The jury was still, absorbing his words. The case had been full of twists and turns, but now, in this moment, Musk had made his closing argument. It was clear, direct, and powerful. The judge nodded, tapping her gavel to signal the end of the statements. "We'll now go into deliberation," she said. "Thank you, everyone." As the room emptied for the final break, Musk sat back in his chair, his mind calm but focused. He had done everything he could. Now it was in the hands of the jury. Whether they saw things his way or not, he knew one thing for sure. He had given it his all. And that, for him, was enough. The moment the courtroom doors closed behind Musk, a sense of relief washed over him. It was over. The case that had consumed his life for weeks, the pressure, the tension, it was all in the past now. He stepped into the hallway, where a few reporters were still waiting, their cameras and notepads ready. The flash of lights was blinding for a second, but Musk didn't flinch. He had been through worse. He paused for a moment, taking a breath before facing the press. He could feel their eyes on him, eager for a reaction. He wasn't one for speeches, especially not now, but he knew this moment was important. He had to be careful with his words. So instead of diving straight into a victory speech, he simply smiled and spoke the truth. Justice was served today, he said, his voice calm but steady. This case was never about winning for the sake of winning. It was about making sure the truth came out. And the truth is, we did everything we could to prevent what happened. No company is perfect, but we strive to do our best, every day. The reporter scribbled down his words, cameras flashing. Musk didn't care much for the media attention, but he understood its importance. This trial had not only been about legal defense, it had been about public perception too. Now that it was over, the pressure of facing the world was gone. As he walked out of the building, a familiar face greeted him. It was Emily, his lawyer. She had been by his side throughout the entire case, and now, as they stood together in the aftermath, he could finally let his guard down just a little. She gave him a nod, a small but genuine smile on her face. "You did it," she said, her voice soft but full of pride. "I knew you would." Musk shrugged, trying to play it cool. "It was a team effort," he replied, glancing back at the reporters who were still milling about, trying to get a few last questions in. Couldn't have done it without the right people. He knew that it wasn't just about his own effort, it was about the support of those around him. From his legal team to the experts who had helped him make his case, it was a shared victory. But even so, the weight of the outcome felt personal. This trial had been a test, not just of his company's practices, but of his own resolve. And now, as he walked down the steps of the courthouse, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel during the whole process: peace. The legal battle was over, but there were still plenty of challenges ahead. The world of business never stopped moving, and Musk knew there were always more mountains to climb. But for now, he could take a breath. He had stood up for what he believed in, and he had come out on top. That was enough. As the day drew to a close, Musk didn't celebrate with grand gestures or loud announcements. Instead, he walked to his car, got in, and simply drove. There was no need for fanfare. He had already won. Now, it was time to move forward and face whatever came next, knowing that no matter what, he could handle it. When the break ended and everyone filed back into the courtroom, the atmosphere felt different. There was a noticeable shift in the air. Musk's expert witness, Dr. Garcia, had done something that none of the prosecution's arguments could. He had added weight to Musk's defense. The jury was no longer looking at the case the same way. They weren't just hearing a billionaire try to defend his company. They were now hearing a seasoned engineer back up everything Musk had claimed. The judge, Helen Carter, was the first to speak as everyone settled in. She glanced at the prosecutor, who was still trying to compose himself after Garcia's testimony. "Mr. Klein," she began, her tone steady but firm, "do you have any further objections or rebuttals to the testimony we just heard?" Klein cleared his throat and stood up, visibly annoyed. He wasn't used to being on the defensive, and it showed. "Your Honor," he started, trying to keep his voice steady. "While Dr. Garcia's testimony is certainly interesting, it doesn't change the fact that there was an incident, a serious one, that caused harm. The issue isn't whether the safety protocols were good, it's whether they were followed properly." Musk didn't react, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. He knew Klein was grasping at straws. The problem for the prosecution was that they hadn't shown any solid evidence of negligence. They had pointed to the accident, sure, but they couldn't connect it to any failure in the systems or procedures that had been put in place. And now Musk was about to make sure they couldn't. "Your Honor," Musk said calmly, standing up again, "with all due respect, Mr. Klein is missing the point. This was a failure of circumstances, not a failure of procedure. We had everything in place to prevent this from happening, and we acted swiftly when things started to go wrong." He turned to the jury, his voice firm, but not aggressive. "We didn't just react after the fact. We monitored the systems, we identified potential risks, and we addressed them as soon as they appeared. Yes, there was an incident, but it wasn't because of negligence. It was because of a combination of factors that couldn't have been predicted. The judge watched him closely, her expression unreadable. But the jury, they were paying attention now. The shift was obvious. Musk had moved from being the defendant in a corporate lawsuit to someone who was trying to explain an unfortunate event, one that even he couldn't have prevented no matter how hard he tried. The prosecution, however, wasn't giving up yet. They stood and tried to poke holes in Musk's argument, suggesting that some of the safety measures hadn't been implemented correctly. But Musk was ready. He countered every point with precision, showing how the systems were always updated and monitored. He even used some technical language, but kept it simple enough for everyone to follow. It was clear he wasn't just throwing out jargon. He knew what he was talking about. Klein's objections became weaker as the minutes ticked by. It was as if Musk was methodically dismantling the case, one argument at a time. And as the day wore on, the mood in the courtroom shifted even more. It wasn't just about who had the better lawyer or who had the best arguments. It was becoming clear that Musk had the facts on his side. The judge, finally acknowledging the turn of events, called for a short recess. "We'll break for 15 minutes, she said, tapping her gavel. "When we return, we'll hear closing statements." As the room emptied once again, Musk sat back in his chair, a small but satisfied smile playing at the corners of his lips. He hadn't won yet, but he was starting to feel like he was in control. The momentum was his, and for the first time in the trial, he allowed himself a moment of quiet confidence. The courtroom wasn't just his stage, it was his arena, and he was proving, step by step, that he was a force to be reckoned with. The judge had made it clear. This wasn't going to be a walk in the park. The air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation as Elon Musk stood up to deliver his opening statement. The room was full of tension. Everyone was curious about how he would handle this. After all, he was known for changing industries, revolutionizing technology, and now, apparently, even the art of courtroom defense. As Musk walked to the front of the room, he didn't seem nervous at all. His posture was straight, his face calm. He adjusted his tie. Nothing too fancy, just enough to look the part. A few whispers echoed around the room, but he didn't pay attention. Instead, he looked at the judge with a quiet respect, then turned to the jury, ready to speak. "Your Honor, members of the jury," he began, his voice low but clear, "this case is about something much bigger than just a single accident. It's about how we look at progress, innovation, and responsibility. It's about understanding that we can't move forward without pushing boundaries." The room was quiet. Musk's words didn't sound rehearsed. They were simple, yet they carried weight. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly listening. It wasn't the usual legal jargon, but it was drawing attention. Musk had a way of speaking that made people listen, even if they didn't agree with him. He paused for a moment, scanning the faces in the room. The prosecutor, Klein, was sitting at his table, arms crossed, clearly unimpressed. He didn't think much of Musk's approach. To Klein, this was a case of simple negligence, no matter how it was spun. "Let's be clear about something," Musk continued, his voice gaining strength. "This company, Hypertronic, didn't cut corners. In fact, we did everything we could to prevent the accident. We took every possible step to ensure safety, even when it wasn't easy. The problem here is not what we did, it's what others didn't do." He paused again, letting the words sink in. A few of the jurors nodded. Musk could tell they were paying attention. He wasn't talking down to them. He was speaking as if they were equals. The judge, however, seemed skeptical. She glanced at the prosecutor, then back at Musk. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice laced with curiosity, "are you really telling us that no one at your company missed something? No errors were made?" Musk didn't flinch. He simply responded, "No system is perfect, Your Honor. But when you have an accident, you learn from it. You fix the issue." And that's exactly what we did. The room grew quieter. The judge's expression softened, just slightly, but it was enough to show that Musk's words were having an effect. He wasn't giving a typical lawyer's speech. He was talking about something bigger than a single case. He was talking about innovation, about doing what others thought was impossible. The prosecutor didn't look impressed, though. He quickly stood up, ready to object. "Your Honor," he interrupted, "we're not here to talk about lofty ideals. We're here to talk about facts, evidence, and what happened on that day. Not grand speeches." But Musk wasn't fazed. "I'm not here to give a speech, Mr. Klein," he said with a small smile. "I'm here to set the record straight." The judge glanced at both men before speaking again. "We'll see where this goes," she muttered, tapping her gavel lightly. And just like that, the room settled into a deeper silence. It was clear. The real battle was about to begin. It was a typical Monday morning, but this wasn't your usual case. The courtroom was buzzing with excitement as people took their seats. The usual suspects were there: lawyers in sharp suits, reporters with their notepads, and a handful of tech enthusiasts, hoping for a glimpse of the man at the center of it all, Elon Musk. Musk sat at the defendant's table, calm and collected, wearing a simple gray suit. No flashy designer outfits, no eye-catching accessories, just a man with a purpose. He wasn't smiling, but there was a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. He was used to high stakes, but today it felt different. This wasn't just any lawsuit. This was personal. Across the room, Judge Helen Carter sat at the bench, eyeing the proceedings with a skeptical look. She had a reputation for being tough, no nonsense. Her eyes, behind rimless glasses, were sharp and calculating. There was no room for nonsense in her courtroom. When her gaze landed on Musk, she raised an eyebrow. She had dealt with billionaires before, but Musk was a different kind of character. Unpredictable, sometimes over the top, but undeniably brilliant. The prosecutor, a tall, serious man named Andrew Klein, stood up to begin the case. He was ready to make his argument, outlining how one of Musk's smaller ventures, a company called Hypertronic, had allegedly ignored serious safety protocols, leading to an accident that caused a lot of damage. It was a pretty typical corporate negligence case, but with Musk's name attached to it, everyone knew it was going to be more than just another day at the office. As Klein spoke, the room grew quiet. He pointed at a projector screen displaying a series of emails and internal memos, claiming they proved Musk's company had cut corners in the name of profit. He even accused Musk of ignoring red flags about potential dangers, putting his company's bottom line above people's safety. The judge didn't seem impressed. She flipped through her papers, glanced up at Musk, then back at Klein. When Klein finished his opening statement, she finally spoke. Her voice was steady, yet with a hint of amusement. "Mr. Musk," she began, addressing him for the first time, "I assume you'll be representing yourself today." Musk didn't flinch. He gave a small nod, his eyes calm. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his voice steady. "I'll be handling the defense." The room shifted. There was a collective stir, a quiet gasp from the reporters. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "You're aware this is a federal court, right?" "It's not a tech conference," she said, a hint of sarcasm creeping in. "This could be tricky." Musk smiled just a little. "I'm aware, Your Honor," he replied, his tone calm, but there was an unmistakable confidence in his voice. The judge stared at him for a moment, sizing him up. Then, without missing a beat, she leaned back in her chair. "Well then, Mr. Musk, let's see what you've got." With that, the room fell into an almost eerie silence. Everyone was waiting to see how this would play out. Would Musk's genius be enough to win him this battle, or would the court's rules catch him off guard? Only time would tell. But one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be your average courtroom drama. It was about to get interesting. Just when it seemed like Musk had made his point with the emails and timeline, he dropped another bombshell. He stood up once again, looking around the room with a calm confidence that was becoming all too familiar. The jury, the judge, even the prosecutor, were all waiting to see what he would do next. And then Musk did something unexpected. He called a witness. The courtroom went silent. Calling a witness in the middle of opening arguments wasn't standard practice. Musk had already laid out his defense, but now he was bringing someone else into the fold. Who could he possibly bring in that would change the course of the case? A few moments later, the door at the back of the courtroom opened, and a man walked in. He was wearing a simple shirt and pants, carrying a small folder. His name was Dr. Emilio Garcia, a former safety engineer at Hypertronic who had left the company months earlier. The jury didn't know much about him, but they knew one thing. Musk had brought him in for a reason. "Dr. Garcia, please state your qualifications for the court," Musk said, his tone casual but respectful. Garcia adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "I've been an engineer in the safety field for over 15 years, Your Honor. I've worked on multiple high-risk projects, including the one at Hypertronic. I was the lead engineer on the safety protocols before I left." The judge nodded, looking intrigued. This wasn't just any engineer. This was someone who had been directly involved in the project. Musk didn't hesitate. He turned to Garcia and asked a simple question. "Dr. Garcia, when you left Hypertronic, were the safety measures in place adequate?" Garcia didn't hesitate for a second. "Yes, they were. In fact, we had an entire team working on improvements to make the system even safer. Everything was in place to prevent an accident. What happened wasn't due to any negligence on the company's part. It was an unforeseen event that no one could have predicted." The room fell silent. Garcia's testimony hit like a freight train. The prosecution had been trying to paint Musk and his company as careless, but here was a top engineer confirming that the safety measures had been up to standard. The judge looked over at Klein, who was visibly tense, trying to maintain control of the situation. Klein stood up, clearly annoyed. "Your Honor, we have no reason to believe Dr. Garcia's testimony is unbiased. He left the company months ago. He has a personal stake in defending his former employer." Musk didn't flinch. He simply smiled. "I don't think Dr. Garcia is defending the company, Mr. Klein. He's stating the facts. The systems in place were sound, and they were designed to prevent exactly what happened." Dr. Garcia nodded in agreement. "I'm not here to protect anyone. I'm here to tell the truth," he said, his voice firm. The jury was watching closely now. They were beginning to see a clear pattern. Musk wasn't just throwing out arguments. He was backing them up with real people, real evidence, and real expertise. The prosecution had been relying on assumptions and selective facts, but Musk had brought the truth to the table in the form of someone who knew the system inside and out. The judge, who had been watching the exchange carefully, leaned forward. "Thank you, Dr. Garcia," she said. "I think we've heard enough. We'll take a short break before we continue." As the courtroom emptied for the recess, the buzz was undeniable. Musk had just introduced a powerful witness who had shifted the momentum in his favor, and the prosecution, for the first time, was starting to realize they had underestimated him. The tension in the courtroom was building. Musk had just finished his opening statement, and now it was time for him to make his case. He walked back to his table, where a laptop sat open, ready to present something that could turn the whole case on its head. The reporters were scribbling notes, and a few jurors exchanged glances. They were starting to wonder, what was Musk going to do next? He didn't waste any time. Instead of the usual legal speeches, he pulled up a series of emails on his screen. They weren't just any emails. These were from the very engineers who had worked on the system that was at the heart of the case. Musk clicked through them one by one, showing the court how each message confirmed the steps they had taken to prevent the accident. "This," Musk said, pointing to the screen, "is the email chain where the team discussed potential risks. We caught the issue before it even happened. In fact, this is where we confirmed the safety protocols were in place." His voice was calm, almost matter-of-fact, but there was a quiet confidence behind his words. The prosecutor, Klein, stood up, ready to object. "Your Honor, I object. We're not here to review emails. This isn't a tech convention. But Musk wasn't bothered by the interruption. He looked at the judge, then back at the screen. "This is exactly what we're here for, Mr. Klein," he said coolly. "You see, your claim that we ignored safety protocols doesn't hold up when you look at the facts. These emails show that we were on top of the situation from the start." There was a pause as the jury looked at the emails, squinting at the text on the screen. The judge leaned forward, intrigued. "Mr. Musk," she said, "are you saying this was an accident, but it wasn't your company's fault?" Musk shook his head slightly. "I'm saying it was a combination of factors that led to the accident, and we did everything we could to prevent it. What's missing from the prosecution's case is the context. They're cherry-picking information. These emails show the full picture." He clicked through a few more emails, pointing out timestamps and decisions made by the engineering team. "Look here," he said, highlighting a section. "This is when we identified a potential risk. This is when we addressed it. We didn't wait until after the fact. We acted early." The courtroom was silent. No one expected this. Musk wasn't just defending himself. He was dismantling the prosecution's entire argument with facts that no one had seen before. The judge nodded slowly, clearly impressed by the clarity and detail Musk was providing. Klein, visibly frustrated, shuffled his papers and tried to regain control of the room. "This is irrelevant," he insisted. "We're talking about the incident itself, not emails from months ago." But Musk wasn't done. He clicked to the next screen, showing a detailed timeline of the safety measures that had been implemented. "This," he said, "is the timeline of events. Notice how we didn't skip a step. Everything was done according to plan. The accident wasn't due to negligence. It was due to a series of unforeseen factors that we couldn't have predicted." The jury exchanged glances again. They were starting to see the case in a new light. Musk wasn't just another billionaire defending his company. He was making them think. And that, it seemed, was exactly what he wanted. The jury had been deliberating for hours. Time seemed to stretch on forever. Musk sat in the courtroom, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table in front of him. There was nothing left to do now but wait. Everything he had planned, every argument, every piece of evidence, had been presented. He had made his case, and now it was out of his hands. The courtroom was mostly empty except for a few reporters, the court officers, and Musk's small legal team. Even Klein, the prosecutor, had left for a while to take a break. It felt strange, almost surreal. A case that had dragged on for weeks, full of tension and drama, was now waiting for the final decision. Musk leaned back in his chair, his mind drifting. It had been a long road to get here. There were times when he felt the weight of it all, especially with the public eye constantly on him. But now, it was different. This wasn't just about winning a lawsuit or saving his company. It was about proving that he could stand up to the pressure, that he could weather the storm and come out on the other side. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. His lawyer, Emily, walked in, a tense look on her face. Musk sat up, immediately sensing something had changed. She had been in touch with the jury during the break, and her expression told him everything he needed to know. "Elon," she said quietly, taking the seat next to him. "They're coming back in." It was a simple sentence, but it hit like a punch. The jury had made their decision. After all the back and forth, all the tension, it was finally over. The judge's voice broke the silence as she called the courtroom back to order. "Will the jury please rise?" she said, her tone calm and formal. Musk stood up slowly, his heart racing a little faster now. He knew that no matter how confident he had felt earlier, this was the moment of truth. Everything hung in the balance. The jury filed in, looking tired but resolute. They took their seats, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The judge turned to the jury foreperson, a woman in her 40s, who looked up at the judge with steady eyes. "Have you reached a verdict?" the judge asked, her voice carrying clearly across the room. The foreperson nodded. "We have, Your Honor. Musk's palms were suddenly sweaty. He wiped them discreetly on his pants, his mind racing. What would the verdict be? Would they find him guilty of negligence, or would they side with him, understanding that accidents happen even with the best precautions? Please, read the verdict, the judge said. The foreperson stood up, a piece of paper in hand. She cleared her throat before speaking. We, the jury, find the defendant, Elon Musk, not guilty of all charges. The words hit like a wave crashing against the shore. Musk felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion flood through him. It wasn't just a win, it was a vindication. The jury had seen the truth. They had seen the effort, the care, and the responsibility behind the decisions Musk had made. There was a moment of stunned silence before the room erupted into quiet murmurs. Klein, the prosecutor, sat back in his chair, his face tight with disappointment. Musk allowed himself a brief smile, but he didn't celebrate. Not yet. The battle had been hard, but it was over now. Thank you, members of the jury, the judge said, tapping her gavel. This court is adjourned. As Musk made his way out of the courtroom, he took a deep breath, letting the weight of the past few weeks slowly lift off his shoulders. He had been through a storm, but he had made it out. The world would move on, but for now, in this moment, he allowed himself to feel the quiet victory of standing firm when it mattered most.